Tyrants seldom come to us openly, hands dripping with the blood of innocent victims. More often than not, they appear as tireless friends of the people, individual receptacles of virtue, ready to save us from ourselves. Let it be recalled, however, that the king's justice is just as often the proud foot of the oppressor. In the end, we ourselves are to blame for receiving him with open arms. In the end, we have deceived ourselves. Norman heirs passed away without designated successor. With no other options, the Protectorate once again turned to the Lau family for leadership. Ursula's nephew, Sunderman Lau, was chosen as Chancellor. Over the next 150 years, he and his successors would be responsible for reshaping the system still in use by the Capellan Federation today. The peace brought by the Star League enabled them to implement sweeping reforms that reshaped the Confederation. Sunderman introduced a series of societal changes that ultimately evolved into the Capellan caste system. Under his rule, citizen relocation became standard practice. Previously, during Norman's tenure, Capellans were relocated locally based on job efficiency. Sunderman expanded his practice, moving citizens between planets to address regional shortages. For example, if the Sarna commonality experienced a shortage of teachers, educators from other commonalities with a surplus would be transferred there. While this approach provided an immediate solution, it sparked widespread resentment among common citizens who felt powerless over their own lives. To ease public discontent, Sunderman created the position of refractor, a rare instance of democracy within the Capellan Federation, as refractors were elected by the population. Their role was to communicate grievances to the planetary diem, and on rare occasions, even the House of Scions. In theory, this position was intended to safeguard citizens' rights. In practice, however, refractors held little real power against the diem, the Shang, or the House of Scions. They functioned more as a means to pacify the people, rather than enact meaningful change. Sunderman's son, Androsa Lau, succeeded him as Chancellor, and continued his father's reforms, with greater sensitivity to public sentiment. His first major policy prohibited the separation of families with dependent children. If a parent was relocated, the local Shang was required to move the entire family and provide them with new housing. This policy faced resistance from the Shang, who feared it would affect their profits, but Androsa remained firm. Next, he introduced state-funded education for all citizens up to the age of 20. Additionally, he established a system guaranteeing employment for those who completed a short-term military service. Later, this initiative expanded to include training for a secondary occupation, reducing the need for planetary relocations by fostering a multi-skilled workforce. Other significant reforms included the total abolition of polygamy instated by Calvin Lau, strengthening parental authority over children, and a restructuring of Capellan nobility, consolidating the ranks into 5 distinct titles: Lord or Baron, Mandarin or Viscount, Chancellor or Count, Lama or Marquis, and Duke. Androsa anticipated that future leaders, particularly the Shang, who would attempt to dismantle these reforms. To safeguard his system, he implemented political indoctrination programs in school, ensuring that his ideology was deeply ingrained in future generations. The final key figure in shaping the modern Capella system was Androsa's son, Warwick's Lau. While his predecessor focused on societal reforms, Warwick turned his attention to the military. Under his rule, the various branches of the Capellan Confederation Armed Forces, the Army, Navy, and the Aerospace divisions, were consolidated under a single command and logistical structure. As part of this reorganization, he streamlined the ranking system to just 5 ranks, though historical records do not specify which ranks these were. Warwick was also a staunch advocate for military modernization. In diplomatic meetings with the Star League, he constantly pushed for member states to gain access to advanced Terran technology. His efforts led to the CCAF army acquiring battlemechs such as the Orion, the Austral, Rifleman, and Shadowhawk. Additionally, he played a crucial role in developing and adopting new technologies that significantly strengthened the Aerospace division. Despite his achievements, Warwick's strong military focus drew criticism from some factions within the Confederation, earning him the nickname Woolly Warwick.
It is not that we love war so much. All of us simply got tired of peace.
In February 2751, the First Lord of the Star League, Simon Cameron, died, leaving behind his 8-year-old son, Richard. Too young to assume the throne, Richard's ascension was postponed, and with terrorist raids increasing across the Star League and tensions rising with the periphery states, the Council of Lords appointed General Alexander Kerensky as regent to oversee the realm until Richard came to age. Seizing upon the growing instability, Warwickslaw proposed an amendment to the Cameron Decree of 2650, which had previously limited the size of member states' militaries. With his focus diverted by widespread rebellions in the periphery, Kerensky, more of a soldier than a politician, was in no position to resist the amendment. Believing it wiser to appease the House Lords rather than risk their opposition, he allowed the decree to be modified. As a result, the great houses began expanding their military forces. On a warm spring day in May 2760, catastrophe struck. A nuclear explosion completely destroyed a Battletech factory on the planet Demeter. The Chesterton Liberation Battalion, a designated terrorist group advocating for the return of the Chesterton world to Capellan control, claimed responsibility. The blast killed at least 200 people and devastated a 50 square mile area. The Federated Sons quickly blamed the Confederation, accusing the Maskarovka of aiding the terrorists, not just in this attack, but in several others occurring throughout the region. However, this accusation did not reach Warwickslaw, as he had passed away 4 days prior. Instead, it fell to his daughter, Barbara Lau, who had just assumed leadership. Barbara vehemently denied allegations, insisting that neither the Confederation nor the Maskarovka had any involvement, direct or covert, with separatist groups. However, convinced of their justification, the Federated Sons launched a limited invasion along border worlds such as Way and Redfield. Upon a hearing of this conflict, Alexander Kerensky returned to Terra, calling a meeting of the leaders of the Lyrian Commonwealth, Free Worlds League, and the Kronis Combine, in an attempt to mediate peace. Strangely, none of them showed any interest in intervening. With neither side making significant territorial gains, except for Redfield, they were content to let the war continue. The conflict dragged on for 2 years until 2762, when Richard Cameron officially came of age. One of his first actions as First Lord was issuing Executive Order 156, which decreed the disbandment of the Great House's militaries. The Great Houses were united in their rejection of this decree, including House Lau and Davion, inadvertently ending the border war. Later investigations revealed why House Davion was so confident in the accusations against the Maskarovka. A former Maskarovka agent, Edgar Borlenko, had been a known member of the Chesterton Liberation Battalion. Federated Sons intelligence believed he served as a liaison between the terrorists and the Capellan intelligence agency. However, Maskarovka records told a different story. Borlenko had washed out of training and left the agency 2 years before the bombing. Whether this was the truth or merely an attempt to deflect blame remains a matter of speculation. One for you to decide.
I watched as the general listened to the news of his removal in silence. Halfway through the speaker's list of justifications, the general stood up and raised his hand for quiet. The speaker stopped in mid-sentence. We all expected an angry refutation of the demotion, a stormy rebuttal, a vehement denunciation of our actions. Instead, the general looked each of us in the eye. A most unpleasant moment, I confess. Taking the purple robe off his shoulders, he sighed and ripped the robe in half. The sound was like the tearing of a human heart. Next, he tore the rank from his uniform lapels, the Star League insignia from his cuffs. After that came the decorations, the citations, the many ribbons of valor and victory. In the end, what remained was a plainly clothed, tired, disillusioned old man. Thinking back on it all, I dare say he could have had all of us killed, the raising of his little finger. How stupid we were to do that to such a hero. How insanely stupid we were. Too late, we came to realize that what we did that day was worse than any crime. It was a mistake.
Stefan Amaris, the man who destroyed everything, the man who ended humanity's golden age. He first arrived on Terra shortly after the death of First Lord Simon Cameron. From the moment he set foot in the Terran hegemony, he dedicated himself to befriending the young successor, Richard Cameron. He showered Richard with gifts and flattery, even going so far as to rename the capital of the Rimworld Republic, Apollo, to Terra Prime, in the boy's honor. For more than a decade, Stefan was Richard's closest friend. The young First Lord looked up to him, sought his counsel on political matters, and trusted him implicitly. And every time, Stefan was there to offer guidance. Slowly but surely, his influence over Richard grew. He persuaded him to withdraw all SLDF forces from the Rimworld Republic, turning over their bases to Amaris' own military. Then, as the war in the periphery escalated, Amaris proposed another move, one that would seal humanity's fate. He declared that he would send his own troops to garrison hegemony territories, allowing SLDF units to be redeployed to the front. The moment Kerensky complied, a dark age had already begun. With the SLDF fully committed to the periphery, Stefan Amaris launched his coup. He rounded up the Cameron family and slaughtered them all, sparing no one, young or old. Even his supposed friend, Richard Cameron, was executed. With no SLDF forces to oppose him, Amaris swiftly seized control of the hegemony, renaming the Star League the Amaris Empire and proclaiming himself First Lord. When news of the coup reached him, General Alexander Kerensky was furious. He immediately halted the periphery campaigns and turned his full attention back to Terra. Thus began a decade-long civil war, one of the bloodiest conflicts in human history. During this time, most of the great houses stood by and watched, including the Capellan Confederation. The Free Worlds League and the Federated Sons provided the most support, granting the SLDF basing rights, material assistance, and, on occasion, the right military aid. Barbara Lau, observing that Kerensky already had the backing of two great houses, declared armed neutrality. Though she personally supported Kerensky's cause, she viewed the war as an internal affair between the Terran hegemony and the Rimworld Republic. This decision disappointed many Capellans. Some abandoned their homeworlds to join the SLDF, while others even deserted the CCAF, taking their equipment with them to fight against Amaris. Despite Barbara's neutrality, Amaris forces attacked Capellan worlds on multiple occasions. Every time, the local garrisons successfully repelled them. After years of brutal warfare, the SLDF emerged victorious. Kerensky reclaimed Terra, executed Amaris, and declared himself the temporary protector of the Star League. He then summoned the great houses to Terra, expecting them to elect a new First Lord and restore the League. Instead, every single ruler refused to accept any nomination. With no consensus reached, the great houses removed Kerensky from power, and soon after, dissolved the Council of Lords, marking the end of the Star League. Not long after, Kerensky vanished, taking his entire army with him. They were never seen again. And then, hell was unleashed.